I've been paying very close attention to the Olympics, and I've come up with a definitive list of what sport would produce the best athletes. I'm gonna go over these 15 sports, and I'm gonna rank them from the least likely to perform well in a series of athletic events to the most likely to perform well. Now, none of this is to take away from the accomplishment of these athletes. They are top of the world in what they are doing. But if we just came up with a new sporting event and I needed to put someone forward who I said, this is going to be my most likely champion, that is what I'm going to do. Before I get started, I would love to know your guys' thoughts in the comments. What summer Olympic sport produces the best all-round athlete, that if you had to put them forward for a new random event that you didn't know what it was, but you said this person is most likely to do very well at anything that's thrown at them, go ahead and pop that in the comments. I would love to know what you think. Now, quickly, before I get into the list, starting with number 15, not a huge number of you are subscribed. Something like 80% of you are not subscribed. It is so easy. Go ahead, click that subscribe button. That helps me immensely, and I can make more videos for you. Please go ahead and do that. Now, let's get on to the list. Number 15. I'm sure based on the list, a number of you guys could guess this, and this is shooting / archery. The reason that this is number 15 is because it's pure skill. Now, there's one shooter who is, to me, the most fascinating Olympian. He comes second, and literally just no eyepiece, no arm piece, gets silver. Just shooting it like your dad shooting a squirrel in the backyard. And the gold medalist had every little gadget available to them. So that was really funny to watch. We'll pop a picture of that right here. So number 15 is archery. I wouldn't really back them, or shooting / archery, accuracy shooting competition. I wouldn't really back them in any other sport other than shooting. Maybe something like darts, but even that requires a different skill altogether. Now, number 14 is a newer Olympic event, and it causes me great displeasure to rank this so low because it is literally my favorite sport, and this is golf. There's obviously great skill acquisition, great hand-eye coordination, but there's not much going on other than being great at golf and being able to walk for 4 hours. We'll get to walking in a minute, but walking at a casual pace, you're not carrying a club, you can handle the pressure really well, but if we're thinking of a new random athletic event, I'm not sure golfers are going to be high on my list of people that I would want representing my country or my personal representative. Now, moving on to number 13. To me, this is the funniest Olympic sport to watch, and it is race walking. This sport makes no sense. If you slow down race walking, they are running. They say their 2 feet are on the ground at all time. That's not true for any race walker. I'll get a slowed down video and we'll pop that here, but 2 feet are off the ground, like every single step with every single person. They're just not fully running. I don't even fully understand the competition, to be honest, but it's obviously phenomenal aerobic fitness. They have 50-kilometer race walks. They cut that out. Now it's just 20 kilometers in the Olympics now. But their strength, their power, their mobility, their hand-eye coordination, their agility, on and on and on. I don't know. How well can they acquire a skill? I don't know, because everyone can walk. Everyone can walk fast. Their hips don't lie, but I'm not sure how that would translate to anything else. That's number 13. Moving on to number 12. We're getting into what I would consider more mainstream sports here, and this is volleyball. Now, I've lumped beach volleyball and court volleyball together. Maybe that's accurate, maybe that's not, but great hand-eye coordination, great power, and great anaerobic endurance. But when it comes to aerobic fitness, foot-eye coordination, skill acquisition, top speed, all of those things, I'm not sure how a volleyball player would translate over. Often they're very, very tall, almost like basketball players, and they're so honed to do the one thing that they're doing that I couldn't see that translating well. And by the way, that is to the detriment of a lot of things. If I put myself in this category, I'm not ranking high on this list because I've maxed out my strength. I haven't given much credence or time to improve my aerobic fitness, to work on my mobility. If I was thrown into this competition and the competition happened to be who could do a jump split the highest, well, I can't jump high and I can't do any sort of split. So there's nothing to take away from these athletes. Again, they are focused and zoned in on exactly what they need to do, but this is just how applicable is what they need to do to any other sport. And that's why volleyball is at number 12. Moving up to number 11, we are on to weightlifting. Now, this might be a little bit controversial because there's a lot of skill that goes into it that would be transferable. In fact, weightlifters are the fastest moving humans in the Olympics. Go ahead and use that as a trivia question with your friends. People would assume it's 100-meter dash, but the speed at which they can get under the bar is insane. Their power is absolutely off the charts. Their strength is very, very good, although not the strongest in the Olympics. We'll get to that in a minute. Their kinesthetic awareness is obviously incredible. Their mobility is really, really good. But there's questions around their hand-eye coordination, their foot-eye coordination, their aerobic endurance. Could they swim? And their ability to acquire other skills. They are so honed into that one distinct movement pattern that even if we took them from a clean and jerk to a heavy deadlift, it doesn't really look good. It doesn't look natural when a weightlifter does a heavy deadlift because they do it like they know how to do it, which isn't necessarily the way to get the most out of the body. And if we go to anything further away, I don't know if a weightlifter could throw a football the furthest if that happened to be the competition. So weightlifting to me, number 11 on what's going to produce the best all-round athlete. Number 10 is the strongest athletes in the Olympics, and these are shot putters. I'm going to do a video on this guy. There's a guy named Joe Kovacs from America. He won the silver medal, and he is the strongest man in the Olympics, bar none. I'm going to do a whole video on this guy, but he squatted 870 for 4 reps in sleeves. He benched 565 for reps. He's doing numbers that powerlifters can't do, world-class powerlifters can't do, that strongman can't do. And I might have to give this guy a visit someday soon. He's not that far from me. But obviously their power is insane. Their strength is great. Their skill development is really, really good. But just like powerlifters, anything lasting longer than 20 seconds would start to fall apart. Mobility wouldn't be great in all ranges. Obviously, they're really good at getting their hand into their neck, but if you had to squat really deep, is that possible? If you had to do something overhead, how well would they go? I'm not sure. If they had to swim, just like strongman powerlifters, they would sink like a rock, which is why Shotput is number 10 on the list of most well-rounded athletes. Coming in at number 9, I've done track sprinters. I'm putting this from 100 to 400 meters. Obviously, their speed and power is incredible, but running is something that everyone can do. Obviously, not even in the same league, not even close to the same category as these types of runners, but we don't get a good idea of how good could their skill acquisition be and how much could that translate over to something else. Of course, if it's, say, running down a soccer field to get a soccer ball, amazing. But when they get there, could they kick it? Could they kick it into a net? Could they kick it towards a target? Could they run for a long distance? Probably not. I imagine you end up as a sprinter because you don't want to run long distances, just like you end up as a strongman because you don't want to run at all. Now, there's questions, of course, around the hand-eye, the foot-eye, the strength. Could they swim? Could they long distance run? And like I said, can they acquire skill? That's obviously going to be one of the major components of how translatable your sport is going to be. And that brings us to number 8, which is swimming. Now, I've lumped all of swimming together. I'm just going to omit the open water marathon swimmers and just talk about the pool swimmers. Really interesting. The pool swimmers, it doesn't seem to be like running at all. The person who wins the 100-meter freestyle is likely really good at 800-meter freestyle as well. And in running, you'd never, ever see that. Of course, there are strengths and weaknesses, but for the most part, the finals of each discipline seem to be really similar from one distance to the next. Now, in swimming, of course, the aerobic fitness is really good. The base of swimmers, the aerobic base of swimmers is absolutely off the charts because they can handle so much volume. If anyone knows a swimmer, you know, since they were literally 2 months old, their parents were getting up at 5 a.m., driving them to the pool so that they could swim for 6 hours before school. Then they finish school and they go back to the pool to swim for another 6 hours. It seems to be almost like cycling, where the more volume you do, the better off you're going to be. So the aerobic fitness is amazing. Their specific power to their sport is incredible, and their muscular endurance is really good. But I'm not sure how this would transition to strength out of the water. Swimmers are notorious for hating running. I've never met a swimmer, and I have several friends who are very high-level swimmers. I've never met a swimmer who loves their dry land training, who loves going for a jog. I imagine that's why you end up in the pool, just like why sprinters end up sprinting and not doing distance running. And the super long torso and the huge feet, it doesn't really bode well for a lot of other athletic disciplines. It would make you a little bit more clunky across the board. In fact, a lot of swimmers have Marfan syndrome. Michael Phelps is said to have Marfan syndrome, which is a genetic disorder that actually makes you a better swimmer. Now, moving on to number 7. Number 7, I have sailing. They obviously have incredible grip strength, incredible upper body endurance, and their ability to think about what they need to do on the water is crazy. If you watch these people, they're maneuvering these boats, they're missing each other by inches at a time, moving at upwards of 90 plus kilometers an hour. Absolutely crazy. But I don't know how good their aerobic fitness would be, how their hand-eye, their foot-eye coordination would be. And I really don't know how well sailing would translate over, but I do think that that skill would translate better than something like swimming or track sprinting, generally speaking. Now, the one that I think is going to beat sailing, and I have this at number 6, is going to be pole vault. Bear with me here. Very niche, but I'll explain why in a second. So their speed to sprint up to do the pole vault is amazing. Their power to pull themselves up and thrust themselves upside down over the bar is incredible. Their hand-eye coordination is obviously very good. Their kinesthetic awareness is really good. And they have balls like no one else. I imagine myself up there at several meters off the ground thinking, what if I launch myself the other way? What if that pole ends up my butt? You know, like there's so many things that could go wrong in pole vault that their balls are incredible. And to be honest, that's something that in every sport, if you're just willing to go absolutely full in, that's something that's going to translate extremely well. Of course, there's going to be questions around their endurance and their peak strength. But I know a handful of pole vaulters, believe it or not, and they're often track athletes who are very good at something. Their collegiate coach wants them on the team, but they're not like great. They don't excel at an individual thing. And so sometimes the best general athlete gets thrown into pole vault just because it's something that the coach knows that they could learn how to do. And there's not many people groomed for pole vaulting from elementary school or early in high school. Now there's one guy who could be a cousin of mine. His name is Brian Hooper. There was a show called Superstars back ages ago. Well, not ages ago, but before I was born. And Brian Hooper was a pole vaulter, and he was the second best athlete of all time in the show Superstars, which is essentially what I'm doing right now. They put athletes from a whole bunch of different disciplines against each other, and they would pit them and say who is the best all-around athlete. And this Brian Hooper guy was phenomenal. And I think pole vaulters are probably one of the most underrated all-around athletes in the entire Olympics. This moves us to the top 5. And in number 5, I have wrestling. Now, not Greco-Roman, but standard wrestling. To be honest, don't really know the difference. But standard wrestling, of course, their endurance is incredible. Their strength is amazing. Body awareness has to be good. Mobility, speed, agility it all has to be great, or you're not going to be a very good wrestler. And in terms of endurance, the average VO2 max for a wrestler is 55 milliliters per kilogram per minute. And if we think of the best marathon runners, they're sitting somewhere between 80 and 90. Now that is insane off the charts. 55 is really, really solid. That's something that say Boston Marathon qualifying runner, a very, very good marathon runner, not Olympic, but they would have that type of aerobic fitness. But wrestlers are focused mostly on their strength and their technique and their ability on the mat. And for them to have that sort of aerobic endurance, which you think could be a bit of a downfall, especially for a larger wrestler, is insane. Now, the question for me with these guys is wrestling is so technical, but could they throw a ball? Could they run a 10K? Could they do a handstand? All of those things, I don't really know, and I'm not confident that they'd be able to nail all of those. They do crack my top 5, but they are not quite the top sport in terms of producing the best all-round athlete. In number 4, I have rugby sevens. Their endurance would be incredible. They're strong, they're fast, they're agile. They could take a hit, so they're really resilient. Their hand-eye coordination is good. They also kick. They're covering a lot of bases. The only issues that I really see are things like mobility and swimming. You know, if it happened to be one of those things, then I don't think a rugby player would fare all that well. But if I had to pick a sport where you could run a 10K and you could also deadlift 500 pounds, we're looking at rugby players. If I'm talking about a sport where you need to throw a ball 50 meters and you need to kick a ball 50 meters, I'm thinking about rugby. There's a lot of things that rugby does really, really well, and I think it produces some phenomenal all-round athletes. That's why I have rugby at number 4, but it doesn't quite crack the top 3. And number 3 is gymnastics. The best biceps in all of the Olympics on those male gymnasts. And I mean, Simone Biles gets 12 feet in the air, and she's, I believe, 4'7", 4'8". We'll correct the editing here, but she's not a tall lady, and she can get literally to the top of a backboard. She could touch her hand to the top of a backboard. Granted, it's on a bit of a springy floor, but I'm pretty sure Mitch Hooper could get nowhere close to 12 feet if I tried on any floor, probably including a trampoline. Now, their power is insane. Their kinesthetic awareness is like a cat. I don't understand. They spin so fast. I don't know how you have any perception of where the ground is. And somehow they manage to stick the landing, the ones who do well. Their flexibility is incredible. Their ability to control their body through calisthenic movements is incredible. But the problems here are that they are very, very small. So if we're talking about any sort of contact sport, any sort of running, any sort of speed event, swimming, anything like that, gymnastics would just not really cut it because they're just, frankly, too tiny to be able to move very quickly over a short space. I also don't know if gymnasts could throw a ball, if they could kick a ball, but something just tells me, and I rank them so high because they have the best body awareness of anyone in the Olympics, in my opinion. So I would back them to get things down pat relatively quickly. This gets to the top 2. And in number 2, the, quote, hardest Olympic sport, and if you watch this, you know why, this is water polo. A bit of history on water polo. It started as aquatic rugby, which was played with a ball made of a pig's stomach. And this was just for rugby players to have something to do in the water. I don't really know why. Perhaps it's easy to recover from, but this is a brutal sport. You're treading water for extremely long periods of time. You have people trying to pull you under the water. You got to stay high enough out with one hand out, so you can't even tread water. Personally, I can tread water literally for about 45 seconds, 60 seconds until I'm tapped, and they're doing it for tens of minutes at a time on top of needing to play a sport. Absolutely absurd, these people. Now, their VO2 max would be great. Their strength would have to be very good. Their hand-eye would be great. Their swimming ability would be great. Their toughness is incredible. There's not a whole lot that they're missing. Now, I don't know if they could kick, but compared to a swimmer, I would back someone in water polo to run because they don't have central pattern generators working, which are like when you go to walk. There's actually, the reason you don't have to think about one step in front of the other is because you have something in your spinal cord that actually causes your body to walk. And these are adaptable over time. And so a swimmer who's really good isn't thinking about every stroke. That's just like their natural movement. So they can almost just focus on a little bit of the technique, take their mind off it. But if we're thinking about water polo and they have to constantly adjust their position, they'd never get into a flow. I would back them to just have the mental resilience to go for a run, even if they didn't want to, because I believe they'd have the aerobic capacity and the mental toughness. The only thing I don't know is, could they kick? I don't know if they could kick, but there's not a huge amount of sports that involve kicking. Everything else, water polo, very close to the top of the list. Along with just this general X factor that if you're a badass enough to do water polo, I'm gonna put you on my team for virtually anything and just trust that you're gonna find a way to get it done. And this brings me to number 1. If you didn't guess this off the bat, these people get the least amount of love in the entire Olympics, and I'm not sure why. Maybe because they're generalists, generally speaking, and they are literally prepared for this simulation that I'm doing where it's who is the best all-round athlete, and these are decathletes. This was introduced in 1912. The pentathlon started all the way back in 708, and then again in 1912, this is when the decathlon became a thing. So in the decathlon, they do a 100-meter dash, 110-meter hurdles, 400-meter dash, 1,500-meter run, long jump, high jump, pole vault, shot put, javelin, discus. They can run far, they can throw, they can run fast. there's nothing that a decathlete can't do. They are, to me, the best all-around athletes, and honestly, I believe the most impressive athletes at the Olympics. Maybe not the most impressive feats because they never actually break a world record because they're training for so many things, but the well-roundedness of these people is insane. In fact, decathletes who finish at the top of individual events, they are good enough to qualify for the Olympics in those individual events, and they have to train for 9 more. I don't understand how they do it, and if I had to put one person on my team to get something done, we're talking about a decathlete. To me, I think that's a bit of a no-brainer. I haven't included every Olympic sport, so I would know some of your favorites of people of sports who produce people who are the most well-rounded athletes. Go ahead and pop that in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. As per usual, lift heavy, be kind. If you'd like to support the channel, merch link is in the description. And if you want a training program by me, that is in the description and the pinned comment as well. Thank you very much, guys. We will catch you in the next video.